Hello. Hello. Good morning, Mr. Sunny.
àwọn ibi tán á wà ní sísọ yẹn méjì ceremony wọn ní ká gbóúnjẹ. Okay, good afternoon. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I couldn't get to Unilag. I am speaking from my office at Ojo. We just concluded a convocation ceremony in which I was fully involved.
Okay, so can you see? You should pay attention. He is the finalist. So he has entered as yes. So he was busy his hand. Okay, all right, thank you.
The line is breaking. I can't hear you clearly.
Hello, Dr. Becca, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you clearly. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right.
Can you hear me? It's Kristen. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Christine. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm fine, thank you.
Yeah, it's good to
Nice
see you.
to see you.
You can raise.
Okay, welcome everyone to this panel, in memory of the Honorable, late Adekunle. We're just going to wait a few minutes because our panel is almost fully populated. We'll wait a few minutes just to make sure that everybody gets here. So please bear with us.
That's really good.
So then I think it would be reasonable to get started. Okay. All right. Okay, I will now call this panel to order. Good afternoon, everyone. And we hope our panelists will join us later. Which way though? So this panel is in memory of the late Honorable Chief Adekunle Alli. And on the panel today, we have four historians who have known him personally, who are going to give us some greater insight into who this individual was and what he means for the study of Lagos history. My name is Abostede George. I'm a historian as well, based at Barnard College and Columbia University. On the panel, we have Professor Tunde Zeka from Osun State University, who is a scholar of cultural history and political history. And we also have three members of the LSA board, actually, just by coincidence. The first is Kristen Mann, who is a historian of Lagos and the Atlantic, who's written a number of books. One very foundational book for my work, Marrying Well, but also books on the history of slavery, such as Slavery and the Birth of an African City, books on the African diaspora, rethinking the African diaspora, and on law in colonial Africa. We also have with us, she's also an emeritus professor at this point, and a emeritus professor at Emory University, and a staunch supporter of the LSA. We also have another board member, Professor Habib Sani from LASU, Lagos State University. Thank you for joining us. He's a historian who has worked on a wide range of issues, including Lagos history, the history of military regimes, cultural history, the history of music, the history of Lekki, and various issues in modern and even early modern 17th century history. And the third or the fourth member of our panel, who is on the way, should be arriving shortly, is Olashunko Shasore-san, who is a well-known lawyer here in Lagos. He was a senior attorney of Nigeria, a former attorney general of Lagos State, and a founding board member of LSA, who also happens to have written on various topics on legal practice, but also on Lagos history. A couple of his more historical works include a book titled Possessed, on the possession of Lagos, a platter of gold, and increasingly moving into the visual realm with a documentary series on the history of Lagos that you can find on Netflix. So please join me, everyone, in welcoming our panelists. On this panel, I think our panelists really will be talking about someone that they knew personally, they knew as a friend. But maybe also giving us some insight into this person as an intellectual, because this is where LSA is a space where we share ourselves as knowledge producers, as people with ideas. So the first question, and I just have a few questions for the panel, and you'll see what other questions pop up as we go along. But I think that the first thing, the natural thing to do would really be for the panelists to give us a sense, each of them, of how they first came into relationship with the Honorable Alli, Baba Alli, as some of us called him. Some people call him Chief Alli, some people call him Pa Alli, or Honorable Alli. And all of these names, I think, had to do with the many lives that he had. He was born in 1934 and dedicated his life to Lagos in various ways. He was a scholar, he was a public servant, he was an archivist who created archives, he was someone who worked in the Oba's Palace, preserving palace history as well. And he was also a very staunch supporter of intellectuals in Lagos, knowledge production, researchers of different generations. So we see even on this panel that there are multiple generations reflected. So that's just to give you a bit of background on who it is we're here to talk about today. But maybe our panelists can individually give us some deeper insight onto exactly who we're talking about. So maybe I will start in the order that I introduced the panelists. I'll start with Professor Decker, then Professor Mann, Professor Sani, and hopefully he'll be here on time, Mr. Shasoe. And just start out by telling us, tell us about your first introduction to the personality of Honorable Adekunle.
Okay, thank you, Abosede. Can you hear me?
Yes. Perfectly.
It is good. It is good that I'm the one to speak first, because I'm very sure that Christine and Habib will be able to say much more about Honorable Adekunle Alli, whom I believe they know better than I do. I met Honorable Alli conference, and we talked very, very briefly though, and actually the interaction was not as detailed, was not as long as I would have wanted. Since then, am I still on? Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so that was the much had as interaction with Honorable Adekunle Alli. But permit me, Mr. Chairman of this session, Bosede, to discuss here what the way I see Adekunle Alli. And this panel, to please allow me to discuss in relation to how the significance that Adekunle Alli hold concerning the intelligentsia in colonial Lagos. That will be the focus of my presentation or my discussion. And as you have said, Adekunle Alli was a scholar, public servant, keeper of records at the Oba's Palace in Lagos. He represents a generation that is now endangered, in the sense that many of his mates gradually different. Here, I'm saying that Adekunle Alli is a representation of about 4 people that I'm going to consider in my discussion. Let me start by saying that from the year 2000, the World Bank started publishing a set of books concerning global poverty. And at that time, the World Bank started realizing that if at all is going to understand poverty better than anybody else, the most authoritative set of people that it needs to go to are the poor themselves. There's no other set of people who have great insights into poverty other than the people who are poor. And so you find a situation whereby in colonial Lagos, the people I'm going to consider as members of the local intelligence in colonial Lagos are those who I consider as the everyday people. People have talked about. Honorable Adekunle Alli was an everyday man. He was someone who identified with people who lived in Lagos in the colonial period, who continue to live in Lagos in post-colonial period. We can forget about the fact that he was also a major public servant in colonial Lagos, was a member of government and what have you. So here, I'm saying that there are several things, there are important things to know about everyday people who I consider as members of the local intelligence here in colonial Lagos. What is it about them? I'm saying here that those people are the authorities of life as lived in that colonial city. They were people who were born into the narratives that were in vogue. They were people who, before their birth, the colonial city had been organized in such a way as to align with the imperial vision of colonialists. So they were born into within this environment, and eventually they demonstrated a thorough understanding of those narratives. So you have a situation whereby they came to understand the city as well as the colonial masters themselves. In fact, in certain cases, they understood the colonial city far much more than the colonial masters, because they were the ones that were doing the living. The colonial masters were doing the living themselves, but they were doing the living in their own way, in their own right. So they understood the intelligentsia of everyday people, understood the fact that there were codes of conduct and there was morality that was designed to regulate life in the colonial city. They understood their code of conduct. The code of conduct in quote, and they understood it enough to be able to manipulate it, to develop it, and in order to suit their own self-preoccupation. In some instances, these people I'm talking about were not only icons, but they were also villains in the colonial city. Villains in the sense that they were able to understand the code of conduct enough to be able to develop an anti-culture that in a way, that culture was able to suit their own personal ambitions. These were people who understood the rituals of urbanity. They understood their life. And eventually, they were master craftsmen and women who adopted survival strategies in lived experience. So in essence, they represented the critical mass of everyday people. Among those individuals, many scholars have examined them, and they include order the very famous Alimoto Pelewura, Rabbi Atu Thompson, that is Rabbi Alasho, even Bello Jaguda, you'll be surprised. Bello Jaguda, who lived in colonial Lagos, to me, I am saying that he represented those who understood that city so well as to be able to develop an anti-culture and even generate disciples. He generated followers that in the same way, he mentored them such that the people he met, these young men that he were able to understand the city so well and to understand those who were not able to understand them as they did. We know that Bello Jaguda raised army of pickpockets in colonial Lagos. Bello Jaguda was an authority in city life. And in the same way as other arms of the city like Lewura and Rabbi Atu Thompson, also known as Rabbi Alasho, these were examples of people who lived the city. Permit me to also introduce to you Aduni Taylor. Aduni Taylor was incidentally my mother, and Aduni Taylor was born in 1930. Aduni Taylor was born into a family of celebrated lawyers, but she was disadvantaged in a way because she was born into a family that was a father who had a father. She had a father and mother. They were not really together in the sense of marriage. But she lived as a girl in the 1930s in Lagos, filled with hope. She was moving from one place to another, trying to understand how to survive. She was raised by her mother, and eventually she had to travel to Ghana. It was a very interesting life. But what I'm saying is that by their life, they underscored an alternative perspective to the term intelligentsia. These people by their lives, they told us something about what scholars have termed living the city. Some of us will call it that the city will say that the city is its people while describing Lagos. So the city was not. These were people who told us the city was not the geography. In a way, a kind of interpretation that's the same as what theologians will call the church. Because the church in theology is not the building, but the people that are in. So these everyday people were people who told us about the fact that it is a contest between space and selfhood. You find a situation whereby everyday people in colonial Lagos were those who demonstrated, they understood themselves, and they showed a very great understanding of the city that they were living in. So in a way, they were telling us that it is about creating a narrative that compelled even the city itself, and more so the administrators of those cities, to constantly engage the lifestyle of people and to develop strategies of governing the city. So you find a situation whereby these everyday people demonstrated so much authority in life, such that colonial administrator had to continuously develop policies meant to understand the lifestyles of these people. So in a way, they gave us something that scholars have termed as biographical ethnography for us to explore as scholars. You have these lives such that they lived in those colonial period, and an encounter with them, people like Adekunle Alli, showed us that we can explore their life. We can sit down with them and talk and get a situation how the colonial Lagos was. That was what Adekunle Alli also demonstrated in his own life while he was alive. So these people gave us a lead. They gave us a leadway into philanthropy, into social justice, into marginality. They demonstrated a good understanding of crime and criminology, of patronage and power. And so you find a situation that the colonial administrators were dealing with people who truly understood the city. So there are two ways One way the colonial administrators were trying to align governance of the city with imperial vision, everyday people in their own part were interpreting the city as it affected their survival. And so you have a situation whereby the colonial administrators were constantly encountering these people.
Thank you.
That is what, to me, Adekunle Alli represented, and the examples that I've shown.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I thank you very much.
Thank you for that correction to the format. If others want to make a presentation, we can start with the presentations as well. Next we have on the list is Professor Kristen Mann. You can either begin your presentation, or you can speak to the question of how you first come into encounter with the late Honorable Alli.
Good afternoon. Good morning from where I am. I'm connecting from Lake Tahoe, California. So it's early in the morning where I am and late in the day where you are. I'm so grateful to be able to be a part of this panel, and I am grateful to the other panelists who are here. Look forward to hearing your perspectives. To Professor George for moderating, and also I saw a number of friends in the audience, so I want to greet you all and say how happy I am to be here. I'll just very briefly speak to the question that Professor George asked. I met the Honorable Chief Adekunle Alli through the Lagos Studies Association. One of the great contributions of this marvelous organization is that it brings us together and it enables us to make connections that we might not otherwise. I believe it was 2017, and I believe that Professor George and I saw Aduke Gomez in the audience, and I think they helped me make connections with Mr. Alli. It may have been the two of them who said, "You must meet this man, Mr. Alli." And then I met him again in 2019 when I came back for LSA and had the pleasure of interviewing him in his home, and I'll speak about that in a minute. What I want to say is that Mr. Honorable Chief Adekunle Alli had a rich and remarkable life. He was born in Lagos before World War II, when, although already being challenged by men and women across Nigeria, British colonial rule was still firmly entrenched. He came of age in the 1950s at the height of the nationalist struggle in Nigeria and across Africa. Soon after independence, he left Lagos for London, where he prepared for a practical career as an accountant. 3 years later, he returned home and he began to serve his newly independent nation through work for the federal government and later through election to its House of Representatives. The young Adekunle Alli must already have harbored a love of history and a passionate curiosity about it. Halimat Sumaton, in her letter nominating Mr. Alli for the LSA's Distinguished Personality Award in 2018, student in London, he found time to visit the British National Archive and engage in independent research. Now, at that time, colonial records were only beginning to be open to the public, so he was a pioneer. Although not then a professional historian, Mr. Alli was already clearly among those who perceived the relationship between nation building and the study of the African past. I myself was just beginning to study Nigerian and African history at that time when I was an undergraduate in the 1960s. And it was remarkable how many prominent young Nigerians and Africans were attracted to the study of history. History was considered perhaps the most important discipline. I think of Eso Biobaku and Adejai and so many others across Africa in that first generation came of age during the period of the transition from colonial rule to independence. And they regarded history as the most important discipline, or in any case, a very important discipline to study. And Mr. Alli was among that, was part of that generation. Now, circumstances beyond Mr. Ali's control led to a change of career in 1983. Following a coup that year, he pivoted and began devoting himself full-time to researching and writing history. Mr. Alli was a voracious researcher, and he brilliantly combined attention to archival and oral sources. He combed archives in Nigeria and Britain, for instance, about Lagos's past, Nigeria's past. But he also knew that in African cultures, knowledge about the past is handed down orally across generations. And he appreciated that oral traditions and oral history provided indigenous perspectives about the past that are missing from the written record. In his writing about history, Mr. Alli combined insights from archival and oral sources to give voice to a diversity of indigenous perspectives. Passion was for public history. As I said, I had the pleasure of in home in Lagos, in Ikeja, about Lagos history. Excuse me. At the time, I was trying to understand the history of Brazilian mosques in Lagos. And Mr. Alli was himself a Muslim, and he on that subject. His knowledge about that subject and about many subjects was much deeper than that of many academic historians. And he had amassed a vast personal archive that would be the envy of any of us. His expertise was astounding. But when I it became very clear to me that he possessed source material, which he had assembled in his home, and that he could and did pull out and share. When he was talking, he has done that with others. I would ask him a question and he'd say, well, I have something on that subject. And he would hear a room off his sitting room, and he would come back with a file or notes of an interview he had conducted or something he had written on the subject. It was quite wonderful. Mr. Alli, though, was less interested in writing academic tomes for an audience of other historians than he was in authoring more journalistic pieces for news, for television, for public commemorations. His was the public, and his goal was to communicate to that wide audience usable knowledge about the past that would inspire and inform civic pride and civic engagement, succeeded. He was a national treasure. He was among the best of a long and distinguished line of local historians who have made enormous contributions to the study of the Nigerian past and in other countries to the study of the African past. But interest to others, he gave time freely. He shared information widely. He helped many. And it's a great privilege to share in honoring the late Mr. Honorable Chief Adekunle Alli at LSA 2023. I'll just summarize by repeating He was a man of passionate curiosity. He was a voracious researcher. He appreciated history's relevance to the present, and he had a remarkable ability to communicate history to a wide audience. He was distinguished by his generosity, and his generosity helped make him a marvelous man and a marvelous scholar. So I look forward to being able to talk more about him in the discussion session. And once again, it's a great honor and privilege to be here with you all today. Thank you.
Next, we have Professor Habib Sani from Lagos State University. You can either make a presentation or respond to the question about your first encounters with Honorable Ali.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor George. I want to say that I met Honorable Adekunle Ali for the first time in 1987, around July, when I was about commencing my first degree project. I was asked to meet him in Lagos by one of my lecturers and mentor, Professor Abdulrasheed Olakunle Lawal, who incidentally had some connection with the man prior to that time. Then I was going to write about the Eleko affair, the event that took place from around 1919 up to 1932, when an Oba of Lagos was vilified by the colonial government because of his support for his own people and because of his opposition to some colonial government activities that were considered inimical to the development of Lagosians of that time. Honorable Adekunle Ali, when I met him, looks like a man who has virtually everything that has to do with Lagos history at his disposal. In his house then at number 6 Sawyer, where he was living, every nook and cranny of his small flat was was filled up with documents, newspapers of as far back as 1901, 1920, 1930. To the extent that most of the things that I needed to conduct that research, he already provided for me. Beyond that, after my first degree, I lost contact with him for some years. Although I didn't forget where he was living, but we want to connect because I started working then as a journalist, and that somehow distracted me from pursuing the line that I am today, the profession that has brought so much to me as an individual, collectively, and as a Lagosian generally. Professor, Honorable Adekunle Ali, I must say, born in 1934, I think March 20, 1934, into that family of Ali, and he used to distinguish himself. He used to make it clear that his own parents were not connected directly to the royalty in Lagos, but they have to the Ibeju axis of Lagos. While the other was a princess from the Agege area. And in fact, the mother's father was Folami, the popular merchant that sold most of the lands where he eventually lived around the Paja axis, Yana Paja, Uleoki, was connected that family around there. And so everybody took interest in the history, tradition, and culture of Lagos right from the era when he returned to Lagos after his education from London. And from that period, he became dedicated. He dedicated his efforts towards collecting documents about the history, culture, and tradition of Lagos to the extent that he became what I can refer to as an encyclopedia of Lagos history and culture. There is no aspect of Lagos history or Lagos traditional family or prominent Lagosian that Honorable Adekunle Alli did not have access to their own records. You cannot mention a particular prominent Lagos family that he will not provide information about. And I saw him more, not as a local historian, as people used to say, but more of an academic historian who was bohemian, who knew his onion, and had access to records to the extent that he used professional historian approach in analyzing every aspect of documents he has come about. He was also dedicated to interviewing people that were relevant to the subject area that he ever undertook. And beyond that, I remember that on one occasion, we were discussing the popular movement of one of the prominent princes of Lagos, who was said to have traveled from Lagos Island to Igede, and that was shocking. Honorable Alli provided an information that indicated that what that man did was not the same fit with what people have always attributed to him. So was believed to have acted just like the proverbial, the biblical Moses, who from Egypt led the Israelites out of Egypt and led them to the promised land. Papa Ali was able to tell me when Shokun, who was alleged of treason during his era, during the era of a previous king in Lagos, when he was alleged of treason, decided to face the Lagos Lagoon. And according to the local tradition, he decided that if he had committed treason, the lagoon should consume him. But if he had not, the lagoon should pave way for him to travel through. And he was able to walk through from Isaleko until he got to Igede. And then the feat that Shokun was able to do had been linked to the introduction of a popular festival in Igede that is known as Remereke. According to Papa Ali, that feat was achieved not because Shokun had supernatural power, but because the Lagos Lagoon at that time was so shallow that he could travel just across it. And so that is the hallmark of a good historian, who should not in any way be seen from traditional historian or local historian as a lot of us used to consider his life. I must also say that Honorable Adekunle Alli was a member of the House of Representatives from 1979 to 1983, when the coup that ushered in Muhammadu Buhari swept them out of office. But in spite of that, it continued to be relevant, not only in Lagos, but in the entire Lagos state. Papa actually moved from being an honorable to becoming a newspaper columnist. And he was a regular columnist in the newspaper founded by his friend and the party man, Alhaji Lateef Jakonde, both of them now of blessed memory. He was writing for the Lagos Horizon, and he had dedicated column where he wrote extensively on the history and culture of Lagos at that time. He also moved later into the television and became a presenter in one Lagos News, a moribund television station, where he used to discuss every Thursday the history, tradition, and culture of the people of Lagos. If we call him a local historian, he was with professional touch. And most of his writing depicted this. On one occasion, when he was writing about King Kosoko and the trouble that Kosoko gave to the British, Adekunle was able to say that Kosoko became a thorn in the flesh of the British group, the British army that actually came around November of 1951. And he was able to defend Lagos using local tools as a kind of defense. He was noted to have caught a lot of the trunks of coconut trees, which he used to defend the number of artilleries that were shot into his territory at that time. And even when the British came eventually and succeeded in defeating Kosoko, they attested to the fact that he gave them a serious fight that no African leader of his time will be able to give. In essence, they were attributing the defense of Kosoko in 1851 November's first attack on Lagos. So the fact that the British or some Europeans would have helped him to put off such defense. But Papa Ali told us that what Kosoko actually did was to cut trunks of trees, especially of coconut trees, and constituted that for the line of his defense, to the extent that the British ship that was to attack Lagos at that time was grounded, and many of those who came in that attack were wounded. So you can see the nature of a local historian who used professionalism, who used all the tools that historians have always, employed in analyzing historical events. Another thing that Honorable Adekunle Ali has done was that he presented at the Lagos Study Center of the Lagos State University of Education, then Adekunle Ogunsoya College of Education, around 2001. And he wrote about the Lagos history, the history of Lagos of that time. And unlike the popular narrative that we were used to, Baba went to the extent of analyzing the fact that what became Isheri was where elephant tusks were, being bought by the people aftermath of the killing of such animals. So Isheri was Isheri where the tusks of elephants were being, removed and eventually was sold to visitors around that time. We can go on and go on about Honorable Adekunle Ali. He was so bohemian, as I have said, to the extent that he had participated in every traditional festival in Lagos, and he had always been the local historian of the various ruling houses. Beyond that, he was also recognized by the Lagos state government during the Raji administration that he led some group of eminent Lagosians to London and Portugal to retrieve some archival documents for the Lagos state government. Okay. I was privileged to be part. Is it time for me to stop?
Yeah. Yeah. I think
let me just round up that.
Yeah, just round up.
Round up that. Adekunle Ali was a man of the people. He was with people. He was very bohemian, and he played prominent role in disseminating information about Lagos. We lost a man in him because he had enormous documents, some of which one of my colleagues said in the audience.
Okay, Mr. Sani, I don't know if you can hear us, but your screen is frozen on this end. But we will come back to.
Are we on?
Okay.
Are we on? Are we? Let's go. Yeah.
You want to present me? Yes. Okay, sound check. Sound check. Are we back? If you are there, stay present. Professor Decker, can you hear us?
I'm with you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
I'm
Thank
with
you.
you.
Professor Van, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here and I hear you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Professor Sani, can you hear us?
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to come back around to fleshing out the issues that have come up in all of these recollections about the Honorable Adekunle Alli. Our fourth panelist is Lashko Shasore San. Are you with us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Did somebody say, can you hear me?
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, I heard somebody say that.
Oh, sorry. That was me. Maybe I should let me just keep quiet. Sorry, that was me. I thought you were talking to me.
Okay. Okay. Okay, everybody. Okay. While we're waiting for our fourth panelists to come with their opening comments, I want to come back to a concept that is really in the title of this panel, which is the concept of a local intelligentsia. And Professor Decker started to expand on this concept in his own remarks, but maybe you can go further. But basically, I think I would like to hear the panelists talk about this idea of the local intelligentsia. We were
Yes.
Okay, so my next question is going to be about the concept of the local intelligentsia. And when you were asked to be on this panel that connected the memory of Honorable Adekunle Alli, the idea of a local intelligentsia, maybe talk about what those two ideas have, those two categories, how they came together in your mind. And while you're ruminating on this question of what is a local intelligentsia and how does it relate to what you know of Honorable Adekunle Alli, I will invite our fourth panelist to either give their prepared remarks or to answer the question that I gave everyone else, which was to talk about your first encounter with Honorable Adekunle Alli.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon,
Afternoon.
Professor. It's a pleasure to be here. I don't know where the mic is. I hope you can hear me. Yeah. Okay. I must first of all commend the organizers for the thought of having this session in memory of Honorable Adekunle Alli, who was a remarkable person for reasons that will become clear as we go on in this session. But to answer your question specifically, Professor Joe, I I first encountered Professor George, I said Professor George, Honorable Adekunle on the pages of the newspaper. I met him in 1983, I think it must have been, as a very aware young man following local and national politics. And I was always intrigued by the members representing Lagos, and of which he was a prominent member. He was on record, he's on record as having said that one of the most profound encounters of his life was meeting the governor. He wasn't the governor when he met him, Lateef Jakonde. And that's interesting because I find in my work in history, one of those profound moments in my life was actually physically meeting Honorable Adekunle, which came a full 12 years after I met him in the newspaper. And I was struck by just the sheer amount of knowledge that he had. I remember when I was listening to Professor Mann talk about his capacity to be able to just say, I actually have something on that subject. And it was almost without cease that any subject you raised, he would just fish out something. But let me go into the man a bit. He was a traditional chief. He was Baba Oja, Lagos, Otumai, Lagos, of which he was very proud. And I think when I do my presentation, I'll show how I think he connects and he ably suits the topic that you've chosen today. But personally, to me, he was a mentor. I learned, I probably wouldn't be involved in and around the scholarship, although independent of history at all, if not for Honorable Alli, because he was the example that I saw. The example of somebody whose interest had become an expertise. And he taught me so many things. He taught me how to read maps. And he taught me that maps were more important in many cases than books when you were looking for historical evidence and leads. He taught me, he had taught himself a good deal of Portuguese because he realized that in order to read and find out about Lagos, particularly medieval Lagos, the first encounters were with the Portuguese, and he needed to have a working understanding of the language, which he did. That was remarkable. I'm not sure many people knew that. A lot would be said, and a lot has been said about his private archives. And how he managed to know where everything was, even though they were not organized in the traditional fashion. And I'm putting it mild. But you know, as much as he had archival and documentary records, he was also a repository of a lot of oral history, because he had lived through and met with so many prominent people that had passed on history and themselves were oracles of Lagos history. I was privileged, and I say privileged because I was in the midst of people who are by far more eminently suited to be chair of the committee. I was privileged to be chairman of the Lagos History Committee that had been charged to come up with some version that was closer to authentic of the history of Lagos from early times. And without a doubt, I mean, he was one of my instant choices to be on the committee. And a lot of other distinguished historians and scholars were on that committee. One of them shares this panel with me, Professor Habib Sani, and Adekunle Gomez is in the audience, and several others. But in that committee, we would be talking about the subject for the day on the agenda, and we would cover it with different views and different tasks would be shared out. And he would start to make another contribution after all contributions had been given. And he'll break out into a song. And in that song was even more history than all what he had said. And to my utter regret, I would I was clever enough to put on my mobile phone many of those times, but that phone has long been destroyed and I can't find it any longer. So much for my archival keeping. But Abdul Latif Adekunle Ali, he will be missed is an understatement. But you know, his work will live for a very, very long time. His work and the people who will continue his work because they were profoundly influenced by what he did. I remember when he was 80, modest celebration in his house on the outskirts of Lagos. And another, I don't want to say reluctant, but another accidental historian who was taking on history as a second profession, if you like, was Professor Adekunle, a distinguished medical scientist and former provost of the College of Medicine, who had taken on history as his passion. And he wrote a very eminently received book on Labolo, James Labolo. He said at his 80th, he said, you know, all the tips that he got from Adekunle and all the information that he was able to pick up that led him to further and better information made it possible for him to write such a book. And the book, if everybody's come across it, is a very, very well researched book. And the same goes for me, because a number of things that I have come across and done were pointed to me by Adekunle. So to say in summary, sorry I went on for so long. Last RAB, he was the Lagos State Archives and Records Bureau. He was one of the driving forces behind my thinking and therefore my contribution in the Lagos State Executive Council, the cabinet of the day, that created LASRAB. So I mean, I'm sure there'll be befitting memories of him there too. So those are my encounters with him. I was honored to be at his repose, sad as it was, but I was shocked, as many other people were, despite his age, that he had passed on, because he had such a boyish gait. Anybody who knew him, he would bounce up and down. We used to meet on the third floor or the third floor of a building in the Lagos State Government Secretariat, and he would bounce up the stairs, and he at that time he was at least 83. And you know, I'd see him up downstairs, and he'd get in the front of his Toyota car, Crown or a big Toyota, and he would drive off into the. And I was saying, "Why are you still driving?" And he would laugh, ha 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 ha. So those are my encounters with him, and they're precious and treasured memories. I'm sorry if I went on for too long.
No, you're perfectly within time. And thank you so much. Thank you for those opening remarks. I think we're getting a general portrait of someone who we know as a historian, but also as someone who just had a passion for the work, a passion, a curiosity that exceeded, you know, simply satisfying professional requirements and qualifications. A kind of curiosity that must have been driven from a deeper source, right? A deeper source than simple professional reward or recognition, etc. As has been pointed out, Honorable Ali also took his research, you know, out into the public square. I think he had a column in the newspaper, which is where you first encountered him. And often academic historians, I think, sometimes doubt that the public is actually interested in what we're doing and talking about, right? And maybe hesitant to write in a popular venue and keep putting out work into the popular venue. But he was doing the complete opposite, right? And attracting widespread attention and a captive audience. Lagosians apparently love history. So, and he knew that very well. So I guess I had that first question about the idea of him being the relationship between Honorable Adekunle and the idea of a local intelligentsia. That's one question. You may choose to address that one or not. But then the other question, I guess, is how do you understand the kind of drive that he showed for historical curiosity and the source of that? Yeah, can you talk a bit about how you understood what drove this man's curiosity? We can go again in the same order. Professor Decker, Matt, Sani, and sorry.
Thank you, Professor George. For me, I think what drove his curiosity to, was I'm sure will have been a question that he must have been asking himself. That how do people see Lagos? Can Lagos be understood? Can Lagos be sold to the public? He must have asked himself a lot of questions regarding in that area. And I think in the process of trying to answer that question, he himself to sell the city. As he himself was taking in information and searching for information, he was passionate about spreading the information about the memories and letting as many people as to get to know about that city, how the city evolved, and how that him as a person to mentor so many I think drove his kids.
Okay.
And was trying to sell those ideas to the public. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Professor Mann, do you want to go next?
Well, I will just say, you said connecting our discussion of the Honorable with the concept of local gen, and my top of my mind when you asked that question was reverence. I think of him and what he has accomplished over the course of his life with great reverence. In part because it expressed his love of the place where he was born, the place where he grew up, the place where he lived, the nation to which he belonged. I'll just be a little bit autobiographical. I was born in a tiny little farming village in Midwestern United States, in Illinois. And I spent my first 18 years there. My town had 1,700 people. I started grammar school with 60 children, and I finished my secondary school with the same 60 children. And my local community, my local culture didn't really interest very much. I won't escape it. I wanted to study something come from. And one thing I really saying about him is that he saw and he was good, grown up with, and he served it, and he studied it, and he documented it, and he shared what he knew with others. So that celebrated, and he wasn't alone in doing that. Many of the people on this panel are also doing that. And it inspires in me a great reverence, because what I wanted when I was young was to escape the place where I'd been born, escape the culture I'd been born into. And so I went I thought, let me go much interesting than this little farm town in Illinois. And so I just, I feel great admiration, deep reverence for the work that the people we're talking to preserve and expand with the world. Reverence is and gratitude to such people. When I came to study Lagos, I knew so well. I was really lucky, and we're all lucky to be able to learn from those who have such deep knowledge and have made building that knowledge the work of a lifetime.
Excellent. Thank you.
Gratitude and reverence when you ask that question.
Thank you. Next, Professor Sani.
Okay, thank you very much. I am sorry I lost contact with the panel shortly, but I don't know what's on ground, what people are actually discussing. But whatever has been said about Honorable Adekunle Alli, he was a man of honor, and I could also remember.
Tell me what I was saying. I was asking the panel to discuss maybe his drive. What do you think was the source of his drive to continue?
What was the drive towards what he was doing?
Yeah.
What was the drive? Okay, I want to say that in the Lagos area generally, we have a valley. Was born and where he lived all his so much in his knowledge of Lagos history and culture, and they were his first audience who always appreciated what he had contributed towards the documentation of Lagos history over time. And so that was one of those things that I considered a major drive in his quest to always do more, to always get more records about Lagos and present it to the people. I must say that at a point, he was rewarded, not financially. He was rewarded not financially, but with the presentation of more documents from various ruling houses in Lagos that if he picks a particular family, Honorable Adekunle Alli will speak glowingly about that family, such that you will be wondering how he got his source. And he had gotten a member or a member of that family who at a particular point had provided him the necessary information he needed. So the drive for him to go along, studying Lagos and presenting it the way he understood it could be seen from this perspective, that he had people who believed so much in him. And his friends cut across both the young and the old. And Honorable Adekunle Alli will not see himself as an old man per se. I have followed him for at least the last 22 years. And he will always call me his friend. That's the kind of a person he was. He was driven by the fact that there was audience. There were people who were always willing to get what he wants to present. And he did that glowingly and in most cases without asking for anything.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. You also served with him on the Lagos Historical Committee, was it? So through that kind of work together, how would you characterize what drove him to serve on these kinds of bodies, to come to LSA at a very late age and to keep participating? I think when he passed away, there was still an ongoing project that he was involved in with Jua and Halimat to digitize his archive. So to keep working on these historical questions and these questions of knowledge production until the very, very end, what drives a person like that?
I think a bit of the answer to the question was in your question itself. He was curiosity. I found his curiosity knew no bounds. He was always interrogating, and that curiosity led him in search for, and in history it is a futile search, but it's a search that keeps you going, for accuracy. It's a bit of a paradox to say that you're looking for accurate history because history continues to change. But he always questioned what was. I'll tell you something. One of my most profound moments with him was one day on one of my several Sunday pilgrimages to his house. I would only go on Sunday because of distance. And he sat me down and he said, do you know that a lot of the dates upon which a lot of the publications and books, authorships on Lagos history are concerned, are all totally wrong. And I said, whatever can you be talking about? What do you mean? He said, well, if you notice, everybody takes their reference point from John Lushing. And he says, there's no way, and he started to prove to me, there's no way this could have happened at this time. And there's no way this date is
okay.
More this issue of first settler and all that sort of thing, it's with all due respect, it's rubbish. We've got these dates and we've all carried them along without anybody verifying them. And they've all been based on somebody said it was in 1640 that X, Y, and Z happened. So I think he was driven by that curiosity and this constant desire to question everything. And I think that's what I found is motivating.
We have a few minutes left, and I should have been monitoring more. I feel like I monopolized the questions. But we had so many rich stories that we needed to hear, and we needed to get on record about who this was and his importance and his continuing legacy in Lagos. Are there any questions from the audience about the Honorable Chief Adekunle Alli that we want to ask to our panelists, or that we want to contribute ourselves? Some of these audience members have their own stories to share. Okay, I see one hand in the front and I see a hand in the back, so I'll start with you.
I think Baba Alli,
please introduce yourself for the record. Thank you.
My name is Jimo Oluwasegun. I'm a historian. I worked with Baba Alli for more than 10 years. My relationship started with him during the Lagos History Committee, and quickly we became friends. I mean, Baba Alli will make you comfortable no matter the age gap. And anytime I called Baba on phone to ask simple questions, we end up discussing for 1 hour. I mean, at a point, I was like, okay, I will come and see you. Say, no. Let me talk to you. He will keep from one subject to another, different, and any narrative you are getting from Baba Alli, be sure that you will get written documents along with it. I and Alima, we had a grant from Columbia University to digitize his archives, and we went to his house. You see, if you enter Baba's house, right from one room, about 4 rooms apartment, everywhere filled up with newspapers, curtains, archival materials, and there is no single family, like Mr. Sonny said, that you will not have anything to take away from Baba Alli. And it's he was generous with his materials. He will ask you, go there, bring this file. Do you want to photocopy or you want to take it away and bring it back to me? That is Baba Adekunle Alli for you. To say the man died, is to say we lost an archives in Lagos. Baba was a moving archive, and that brings the question of methodology. in terms of
I
methodology.
think we lost again.
They are coming back.
Because from Baba can sit with you and you write a full PhD thesis on any contemporary history of Lagos or before colonial period. And secondly, you talked about the passion for Lagos history. I think Baba was born at a time when Lagos identity was being questioned during the transfer of power. He must have got himself involved in that debate. And the desire to defend his identity is one fundamental passion that Baba Ali, was noted for. Because it will tell you, this is where I come from. I have no any opponents. Because when you keep history to yourself, then nobody knows your story. But when you allow people into your memory, then you tell the story to others to know.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Second hand in the back. Yes. Please wait for the mic.
Thank you very much. My name is Moses Ilo. Baba Ali, but when I heard of his passage, I was shedding tears. But before then, I met Baba Ali in a panel I did. So what I want to say to the audience, especially some of our guests, including Dr. Sonny, is that if it's possible for a committee to be set up and in line with what the last speaker has even said, to visit the strong room, the archival house, so as to retrieve some documents from Baba Ali house. That is one. And the second one is that Baba Ali gave me an appointment, but it was the period whether it was having ill health. But nevertheless, he keep on promising me to the extent that I now say, well, let me give him a rest. But before I could know it, it was his passage that I later learned. So the most important thing that I want to even tell us is that whenever we have any appointment, because to me now we book the appointment, but because of my location in Ijebu, vis-a-vis is Ipaja now, it was difficult for two of us to meet at the agreed time. Whenever we are having appointment with some people like that, we have to create time so as to meet them so that we can tap from their memory. May God help us in Jesus' name. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll have one more set of reflections on who Baba Ali was.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Adekunle. I just thought I should contribute to this discussion because one of my favorite memories of Baba Ali, we've been speaking here about his love for the indigenous Lagos culture, but he also loved the settler culture because there was an afternoon he looked at me and said, Gomez? I said, yes. He said, I knew it. And he said, yes, your uncle is Jide Thomas. I said, yes, sir. That actually my dad's uncle. He said, that in the 70s, he made my dad's uncle go with him, walk all along Lagos, pointing out sites that were important to the Gomez family. So I thought I should just let you know that it's not just, it was also settler, as in we who have been here before 1861.
So I think the perfect place to round up
One last just announcement. So I think I'm not saying it's formally yes, and it's not official. And I'm going to talk to I think the LSE can actually establish a travel grant for the student in of Mama.
Yeah, now.
Yes, I think you can do that. I think you're gonna let the family know and then get the approval and person and I will speak on then table it for the board of directors. But I'm very sure that before the end of this year, of course, this year, we'll have a grant for Lagos specifically for research in the history of Lagos.
I think that's a wonderful note to end on. We started with, we've covered so many dimensions of who he was as a thinker and the kinds of things that he talked about. It was about Lagos, but across time, across space, across different communities. It was a curiosity that carried him through many phases of Lagos history, profoundly transformative phases, and a curiosity that carried him until the very end of his life. And it's beautiful to see that Lagos Studies is able to kind of continue his legacy by supporting the curiosity and scholarship of young scholars coming up today with the impending Alli Prize for Fellowship. I want to thank all of our panelists for sharing so generously of their time and their memories and what they knew, fleshing out a greater portrait of this man who was so multidimensional. I'm sure the portrait will continue to be fleshed out in many other venues for the rest of this year. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's great to be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great time.
Congrats, man, on your book. She sent me the image.
Professor Man, great to see you again.
Nice to see you all. It's an honor and a privilege. So good to see you all. Thank you.
You.